So at this point, we have created a list of JavaScript variables which will help us work off them and lay out some web page elements where we want to lay them out, and then load them onto our web page with the help of a document fragment. Let's start doing that. Before we do, let me do one thing just because by me doing this thing, the rest of the stuff I'm about to explain will be clearer. We created a variable called a box header, which is just an h1 tag. That h1 tag is blank. There's nothing inside of it. Let's throw something inside of it real quick. H1 tags, as well as any other tag that lives on your web page, it has a DOM property called inner HTML, which means you can actually insert content into the tag. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to that box header's inner HTML property and add some copy to it. And what does the code for that look like? Well, first you reference the variable or the h1 tag, however you want to think of it, called box header, and then you type out inner HTML, and then you wrap in quotes the copy that you want, what you want it to say. And what do I want it to say? In this case, I want it to say the original box. Alrighty. Okay. Let's review all these variables real quick and just make sure we understand what they mean. Basically, we've got this variable here called wrapper. It's our document fragment. We're going to load all of our web page elements inside of this document fragment. And then we're going to load that document fragment onto a web page, meaning it'll take all the elements with it. We've also got some variables here that represent the actual web page elements that we want to arrange and load onto our page. We've got a variable here called outer div. It's just a div tag. Box header we just talked about. It's an h1 tag. Inner div is just another div tag. And then we've got copy, which is just a simple text node. So to arrange these, let me just go back to the slide deck from the previous video. So this box right here is the box that we're about to lay out. This red dashed box right here, you need to think of it as the web page element that contains all of the other web page elements. So in other words, this box here contains this original box thing here. That's actually our h1 tag. Then we've got an inside div. If you remember, there was an inner div variable I created, which just represents a div. That's this bad boy here with the gray background and black outline. And then inside we've got a hello world. That's the text string that we created using createToCnode. Yeah. All these web page elements, obviously, they're just floating around in our off DOM in our memory. We haven't really laid them out yet. Let's do that. Now, what's the best way to explain this? Outer div, which is this variable right here, that is going to end up being represented by this box here with the red dash line border. So you can think of outer div as the parent. And if it's the parent, it means it's going to have some children at some point. So let's add some children to it. The first child that I want to add to it is the h1 tag, which in our variable list is represented by this copy here that says original box. And how do we add that h1 tag, which is box header, to the inside of outer div? Well, the first thing we have to do is reference the parent element, the element that we want to load stuff into. In that case, it's outer div, excuse me. And then we have to call the appendChild method, which we discussed in the last video. And then do these parentheses right here. And inside these parentheses, we have to put a reference to the element that we actually want to load into our parent, which in this case is box header. So that means box header goes inside of here. Okay, that's good. And now we have got this div right here with the gray background and the black outline. In our variable list, as far as it's concerned, that's going to be represented by the inner div. So we want to load inner div inside of outer div. And how we do that? Well, we would basically repeat the coding pattern which we just wrote out here. Outer div is the parent that we want to append whoops, if I can spell it, that we want to append a child to. What child do we want to append to it in this case? That would be inner div. Excellent. Oops. All right. now we have got, where are we? This text string here, hello world, that is represented in our variable list by this copy variable. But as if you've been following along, you'll realize that we have to load this text string inside of this div right here with a gray background and black outline, and that one is inner div. So in order to load copy inside of inner div, we have to introduce a new parent element to our list. That parent in this case, excuse me, is inner div. We want to append a child to inner div. What child do we want to append to it? Copy. Excellent. So believe it or not, we're actually done arranging our web page elements the way we want to lay them out, but they're not styled yet. We actually have to add some style to them. And the styles that we want to add, they already exist in our styles.css file. So let's talk about that in depth a bit. So outer div, we want outer div to be styled so it's got this red dash line border here. We have a reference to this style in our style sheet already, the styles.css file, and it's represented by this outer box 1 ID. And as you can see, here's a reference to the style, making sure it has a red dash line with a border. Now, to attach outer box 1 to outer div as a style, which is exactly what we want to do here, there is a plain old JavaScript way of doing it, and I'll just show that to you. Outer div, and then you call something called the setAttribute method, like this. And setAttribute takes two parameters. The first parameter, what attribute do we want to set? Well, in this case, it would be an ID. The second parameter, what is the name or value of that ID? Well, in this case, it would be outer box 1. The problem with setAttribute, though, is that it sucks for quite a few reasons, but the main reason that we're concerned about it sucking is that it's buggy on Internet Explorer 7 and lower. And yes, we as web developers are getting to the point where we no longer care what our code looks like in IE7, but we're not there yet, so we got to care for it. We have to care about it, excuse me. So we have to find a way to deal with these cross-browser issues, making sure that when we set an attribute, it works on as many browsers and devices as possible. In this case, we're going to set attributes with jQuery using something called the attr method. Oops, the attr method, which looks like this. The attr method is very, very powerful. There's actually a link to the reference to jQuery.attr in the deck that's online. Definitely hope you read it. So we want to add an ID name of outer box 1 to outer div. And how would we do that with jQuery? Well, first we'd reference outer div with jQuery, like so. And then we would call that attr method, like we just discussed. In this instance, attr also takes two parameters. You'll see in the next video that we can add more, but for right now it only takes two. So the parameters, what attribute do we want to add to outer div? That would be an ID. The second attribute, what is the name or value of that ID? That would be outer box 1. Okay, now we've got inner div here, and inner div again has a gray background with a black border. And a style for that also exists in our style sheet in the form of this inner box 1 ID. So how do we add the inner box 1 ID to inner div? Pretty much repeating the same coding pattern which we just typed out above. Hey, inner div, we are going to call the jQuery.attr method. This also takes two parameters in the same way that we just did above. First parameter, what attribute do you want to set an ID? Second attribute, what is the value of that ID? In this case, it would be inner box 1. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to load all of our content into our web page. Now, as a reminder, this web page element here, this is a div, this box here with the red dash line border, and it's represented by outer div. If we just load outer div onto our web page, it's going to take everything with it, which is exactly what we want. But we have to move it over with the help of a document fragment, which we are referencing in this variable here called wrapper. So how do we load outer div into our document fragment? Pretty much using the same appendChild thing that we've been doing up to this point. So wrapper is the parent that we want to append a child to, and the child that we want to append to it in this case is going to be called outer div. Okay, so whoops, sorry about that. Type too fast. I am so sorry. That's how it should look. Okay, so now we've actually got to load all of our content onto our web page, and as a reminder, we want to load all this content inside of this div with an ID name of container, which is referenced in our variable list by this main node variable. So how do we load wrapper into main node? Once again, appendChild to the rescue. So main node is now the parent that we want to append a child to, and the child we want to append to it is wrapper. Okay, so we should be done. Our code should work, and basically when we load up our web page, our content should look like this box right here. Let's see if it does. Excellent. Everything works the way we want to. Now I want to just show you, as I said in the first video, we can never do a simple view source when we load content in the way we just did, because as you can see, nothing is inside of the container where we loaded stuff. But if we use our browser-based dev tool with a really good DOM viewer, we can see that all the content is visible. So here's the div with an ID name of container, and here's all the content inside of it. There's the h1 tag we loaded. There's the div we loaded. There's all that copy that we loaded into original box, hello world. So things are working. Okay, so we're done loading the first batch of content onto our web page. Let's load the second batch of content onto our web page with the help of cloneNode. So let's go to video 3.